The champagne glasses clinked around me like wind chimes in a hurricane, and I stood there watching my wife, Lauren, demolish what was left of my dignity with surgical precision. The corporate party sprawled across the downtown rooftop, all gleaming surfaces and power suits, while the city lights twinkled below like fallen stars. "Oh, my poor husband Jack could never organize something this sophisticated," Lauren announced to the circle of board members, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for public humiliation. "He's more of a hands-on type, if you know what I mean." The laughter rippled through the group like poison in a well. I counted every smirk, cataloged every sneer, filed away each face for future reference. Victoria Lane, the sharp-eyed board member with silver hair and calculating eyes, offered me a sympathetic grimace. Claire Bennett, Lauren's supposed best friend, looked nervous, her fingers fidgeting with her pearl necklace. I sipped my whiskey and let my wife continue her performance. After 22 years of marriage, I'd learned that Lauren Whitmore-Mercer loved an audience almost as much as she loved the sound of her own voice. "Jack's been struggling with the merger," she continued, her manicured hand gesturing dismissively in my direction. "Poor thing just can't adapt to corporate strategy. He's stuck in that blue-collar mindset, you know?" More laughter. I noticed how Ethan Cross, that slick corporate climber with his perfect teeth and expensive cologne, leaned closer to my wife. Too close. His hand brushed her lower back, lingering just a moment too long. Interesting. "Well," I said, finally speaking up, "I've always believed in letting actions speak louder than words." My voice carried across the group, steady and calm. Sometimes the most effective strategies come from unexpected places. Lauren's eyes flashed with irritation. She hated when I interrupted her monologues. "Oh, Jack's full of folksy wisdom," she said, turning back to the group. "Next he'll be quoting his boxing coach." "Actually," I said, setting down my glass, "Ray always told me that nobody expects a punch from the back foot. Smart man, Ray." The conversation moved on, but I caught Victoria's slight nod and Claire's worried glance. Ethan whispered something in Lauren's ear that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. The sound made my stomach turn. I excused myself and walked to the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city I'd helped build with my construction company before Lauren's corporate machinations forced the merger that nearly destroyed me. The wind carried the scent of rain and betrayal. My phone buzzed, a text from my daughter Samantha, home from college for the weekend. "Dad, we need to talk. It's about Mom." The pieces were falling into place, and I was starting to see the picture they formed. It wasn't pretty, but it was clear. I turned back to watch my wife hold court, her red dress catching the light like a warning flag. She was beautiful, I'd give her that. 46 years old and still turning heads, still commanding rooms, still believing she was untouchable. We'd see about that. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The party wound down around midnight, and Lauren barely spoke to me during the ride home to our suburban McMansion. She spent the entire drive texting, her fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. In the dim light of the dashboard, I could see her smiling at whatever responses she was getting. "Good party," I said as we pulled into our circular driveway. She replied, not looking up from her phone. Ethan seemed to be enjoying himself. Her fingers paused for just a moment. "He's a valuable colleague." "I'm sure he is." We walked into our house in silence. Lauren headed straight upstairs, claiming exhaustion, while I poured myself another whiskey in the kitchen. Through the window, I could see our neighbor Gail's curtains twitching. That woman saw everything that happened on our street. I was halfway through my drink when I heard Lauren's shower start running. Her phone, forgotten in her hurry, sat on the kitchen counter like a gift from the gods. I'd never been the snooping type, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The phone was locked, but I knew Lauren's patterns. Her birthday reversed. The screen lit up, revealing a treasure trove of messages. The first few were innocent enough. Work discussions, lunch plans with Claire, complaints about her mother. But then I found the second messaging app, hidden in a folder marked Work Backup. My hands trembled as I scrolled through months of messages between Lauren and Ethan. The words burned themselves into my memory. Explicit photos, detailed plans for hotel meetups, mocking commentary about poor, clueless Jack, and his pathetic business struggles. One message thread made my vision blur with rage. Or Ethan. "When are you going to leave him?" Lauren. "Soon. Just need to make sure I get everything in the divorce. He's too stupid to see it coming." Ethan. "What about the house?" Lauren. "Already transferred to my name last month. He signed the papers thinking they were refinancing documents. Moron." I set the phone down carefully, my hand steady despite the storm raging in my chest. The shower was still running upstairs. I had time. I photographed every relevant message, every photo, every piece of evidence that would be useful later. Then I deleted the photos from her recently sent folder and cleared the camera roll, making sure she'd have no record of what she'd shared. The shower stopped. I placed her phone exactly where she'd left it and finished my whiskey. Lauren came downstairs in her silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel. "I'm exhausted," she announced, grabbing her phone. "Don't wait up." "Sweet dreams," I said, watching her scroll through her messages. Her brow furrowed slightly, probably wondering why some of her photos were missing, but she didn't say anything. After she went to bed, I sat in my study and planned. The old Jack would have confronted her immediately, would have screamed and thrown things and made a scene, but that Jack was gone, replaced by something colder and more calculating. I opened my laptop and began researching. Property records, financial documents, corporate filings, everything I needed to understand exactly how thoroughly my wife had been planning to destroy me. The picture that emerged was masterful in its cruelty. Over the past year, Lauren had systematically transferred assets, manipulated contracts, and positioned herself to walk away with everything while leaving me with nothing but debt and humiliation. She'd underestimated me, though. She saw the blue-collar contractor, the guy who worked with his hands and left the thinking to others. She didn't see the man who'd built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing, who'd learned to read people and situations with the same precision he'd once used to read blueprints. I spent the rest of the night planning my counterattack. By dawn, I had a strategy that would have made my old boxing coach proud. Ray always said the best fighters were the ones who could take a beating and keep thinking, who could turn their opponent's strength against them. Lauren thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Time to show her that I'd been studying the board all along. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. I woke up alone. Lauren's side of the bed was cold, suggesting she'd either never come to bed or had left early. Her car was gone from the driveway, and a quick check of the kitchen counter showed her phone was missing too. Samantha was waiting for me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. My daughter had Lauren's sharp features, but my stubborn jawline, and right now that jaw was set in a way that meant trouble. "We need to talk, Dad." I poured myself coffee and sat across from her at the breakfast bar. "I figured as much. What's on your mind?" "It's about Mom." She stared into her cup like it might hold answers. "I know about her. Friend?" The word hung in the air between us like a challenge. I kept my expression neutral, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "What kind of friend?" "The kind that picks her up in expensive cars for business dinners that last until 3 a.m. Samantha's voice was bitter. "The kind that sends flowers to the house when you're not around. The kind that—" She stopped, shaking her head. "God, Dad, how long have you known?" "Since last night," I admitted. "How long have you known?" "A few weeks. I came home early from campus one night and saw them together, in his car, in our driveway." She looked up at me with eyes that were too old for 21. "I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how, and part of me hoped I was wrong." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing telling me now." "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? The old Jack would have kicked down doors and made demands, but the new Jack, the one who'd spent all night studying his enemy's moves, had different plans. "I'm going to handle it," I said, "but I need you to trust me and stay out of it." "Can you do that?" Samantha nodded, though she looked skeptical. "Just don't do anything that'll get you in trouble, okay? She's not worth it." After Samantha left to meet friends, I drove to Ray's boxing gym on the south side of town. The place was a relic from another era, cracked leather heavy bags, speed bags that had seen better decades, and the permanent smell of sweat and determination. Ray Martinez had been training fighters here for 30 years, and he'd taught me everything I knew about taking a hit and hitting back. I found him in his office, a cramped space behind the main gym floor where he kept his records and dispensed wisdom in equal measure. Ray was pushing 70, but still looked like he could go 10 rounds with men half his age. "Jackie boy," he said, looking up from his paperwork. "You look like someone stole your lunch money." "Worse," I said, settling into the folding chair across from his desk. "Someone stole my wife." Ray set down his pen and gave me his full attention. In all the years I'd been coming here, first as a young man learning to channel his anger into something productive, then as a middle-aged businessman trying to stay in shape, Ray had never judged me. He just listened and offered advice when asked. I told him everything, the party, the phone, the messages, the systematic betrayal. Ray listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. "So what's your plan?" he asked when I finished. "I'm working on it." Remember what you always told me about fighting smarter opponents? Don't fight their fight. Make them fight yours. Ray leaned back in his chair. You thinking about getting legal help? Eventually. But lawyers are expensive and slow, and they play by rules that favor people like Lauren. I need something more immediate. Ray studied me for a long moment. You know I can't encourage anything that'll get you locked up. I'm not talking about anything criminal, just creative. Creative. Ray smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Well, creativity never hurt anyone, much. I spent an hour working the heavy bag, letting muscle memory and repetition clear my head while I refined my strategy. By the time I left the gym, I knew exactly what I needed to do first. The downtown Marriott was Lauren's favorite spot for her business meetings. The valet parking attendant, a college kid named Tommy who'd worked construction for me one summer, recognized me immediately. Hey, Mr. Mercer, haven't seen you around here lately. Just checking on some things, I said, slipping him a 20. You seen my wife's car today? The silver BMW? Tommy's expression shifted slightly. Yeah, she's here. Has been since about 10 this morning. With her business associate? The kid looked uncomfortable. Listen, Mr. Mercer, I don't want to get in the middle of anything. You're not, I assured him. I just need to know what kind of car he drives. Black Porsche 911. Real nice ride. License plate says Cross 1. Subtle as a brick through a window, our boy Ethan. I thanked Tommy and walked around to the hotel's side parking garage. Sure enough, there was the Porsche, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like it was posing for a magazine cover. I'd brought a small toolkit with me. Nothing fancy, just some basic items that any contractor would carry. I knelt beside the car and got to work. First, I let the air out of all 4 tires. Not slashing, that would be vandalism. Just releasing the air, which was more of an inconvenience than actual damage. Then I opened the hood and disconnected the battery cables, making sure to leave them in a position where they looked like they'd simply worked loose. For the final touch, I opened a container of shrimp paste I'd picked up from an Asian grocery store and carefully applied small amounts to the car's air intake vents. The smell wouldn't be immediately apparent, but once the engine heated up and the ventilation system kicked in, Ethan would be in for an unpleasant surprise. I left a small note tucked under the windshield wiper. Hope it was worth it. A concerned citizen. The whole operation took less than 10 minutes. I was back in my truck and halfway home before I allowed myself to smile. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Lauren's number. Jack, something terrible has happened, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Someone vandalized Ethan's car at the hotel. The police are here and everything. That's awful, I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. What kind of person would do something like that? I don't know, but it's so embarrassing. The hotel security cameras might have caught something, and if this gets back to the company... I'm sure it'll blow over, I said. These things usually do. There was a pause. Where are you? Just got back from Ray's gym. Why? No reason. I'll be home later. I need to help Ethan deal with this mess. Of course you do, I said. Take your time. After she hung up, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, savoring the moment. It was a small victory, barely a jab compared to what was coming, but it felt good to finally hit back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw what happened to Cross's car. Nicely done. We should talk. V. Victoria Lane. Interesting. I hadn't expected to hear from her so soon, but I wasn't surprised that she'd put 2 and 2 together. The woman hadn't gotten to her position on the board by being slow on the uptake. I texted back, Coffee tomorrow? Neutral ground. Her response came immediately. Brewster's Cafe, downtown, 10 a.m. Come alone. The game was expanding, bringing in new players. I was curious to see what Victoria wanted, but first I had more immediate concerns. Lauren would be home eventually, and I needed to be ready for whatever story she'd concocted to explain her day at the hotel. I spent the evening in my study, ostensibly working on business paperwork, but actually researching Ethan Cross. The man had an impressive resume, Harvard MBA, fast track through several major corporations, currently VP of Strategic Development at Hartwell Industries, Lauren's biggest corporate rival. But he also had some interesting vulnerabilities. A messy divorce 3 years ago that had cost him half his assets. A gambling problem that he thought he'd kept quiet but had left traces in his financial records. A pattern of workplace relationships that had ended badly for the women involved. Lauren might think she'd found her knight in shining armor, but she'd actually hooked up with a shark who was probably planning to devour her once he'd gotten what he wanted. The irony was delicious. She came home around 11, looking frazzled and angry. Her carefully styled hair was mussed, and her makeup was smudged around her eyes. "Rough day?" I asked from my chair in the living room. "You could say that." She kicked off her heels and slumped onto the couch. "Some maniac vandalized a colleague's car at the hotel. The police think it might be connected to corporate espionage." "Corporate espionage? Over a car?" "It's more complicated than that." She rubbed her temples. "There are a lot of sensitive deals being negotiated right now. People are on edge." I nodded sympathetically. "Well, I'm sure the police will figure it out. They usually do." Lauren looked at me sharply, as if trying to detect some hidden meaning in my words. But I kept my expression neutral, just a concerned husband listening to his wife's troubles. "I'm going to bed," she announced, standing up. "It's been a long day." "Sweet dreams," I said, the same words I'd used the night before. After she went upstairs, I opened my laptop and began phase 2 of my research. If I was going to war with Lauren and Ethan, I needed to understand all the players on the board, starting with Victoria Lane, who apparently wanted to be my ally. This was going to be interesting. Brewster's Cafe occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that made every conversation feel like a conspiracy. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a corner table where I could watch the entrance while keeping my back to the wall. Old habits from my boxing days. Victoria Lane entered precisely at 10, scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to reading rooms and people. She wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned every thread. "Jack," she said, sliding into the chair across from me, "thank you for coming." "Curiosity got the better of me," I admitted. "Your text was intriguing." She ordered black coffee from the hovering waitress, then fixed me with those calculating gray eyes. "I've been watching you for a while now, at board meetings, company events, social gatherings. You're not what you appear to be." "What do I appear to be?" "Lauren's harmless husband, the blue-collar contractor who got lucky marrying up." She smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. "But that's not who you are, is it?" I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. Victoria struck me as someone who appreciated patience. "I know about your company before the merger," she said. "Mercer Construction wasn't just successful, it was innovative. You pioneered 3 different building techniques that are now industry standard. You employed over 200 people and had contracts worth $50 million annually. Ancient history. Is it? Because I also know that the merger wasn't your idea. Lauren orchestrated it, used her corporate connections to create financial pressure that forced you to sell. She positioned it as helping you expand, but really she was consolidating assets under her control." The waitress returned with Victoria's coffee. We sat in silence until she was gone again. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Lauren Whitmore is a cancer in our organization, and I'm tired of watching her metastasize." Victoria's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "She's manipulative, ruthlessly ambitious, and she's been using her position to benefit herself at the company's expense." "And you think I can help you with that?" "I think you're already helping yourself, and our interests happen to align." She leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday's incident with Cross's car was elegant. Disruptive but not criminal, embarrassing but not actionable. It showed creativity and restraint. I kept my expression neutral." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't," Victoria smiled again. "But hypothetically, if someone were planning a more comprehensive campaign against Lauren and her allies, they might benefit from having a friend on the inside." "Hypothetically." "Hypothetically." She reached into her purse and withdrew a manila envelope. "These are copies of some interesting documents that came across my desk. Board meeting minutes, financial reports, personnel evaluations, all perfectly legal for a board member to possess and share." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "What's your endgame here, Victoria?" "I want Lauren gone. Not just demoted or transferred. Gone. She's been positioning herself to make a play for the CEO spot when Morrison retires next year, and I can't let that happen. She'd destroy the company within 5 years. And you want the job yourself." "I want the job to go to someone qualified. Whether that's me or someone else is secondary." She stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the table. "Think about it, Jack. You're already at war. The question is whether you want to fight alone or with allies." After she left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, nursing my coffee and reading through the documents she'd given me. They painted a picture of systematic corruption, inflated expense reports, questionable vendor relationships, and a pattern of promoting people based on personal loyalty rather than competence. But the most interesting document was a copy of Lauren's personnel file, including performance reviews and disciplinary actions. Apparently, my wife had a history of workplace relationships that had ended badly, and HR had been documenting incidents for years, including a complaint filed by Claire Bennett 3 years ago, alleging that Lauren had sabotaged her promotion in retaliation for ending their friendship. The complaint had been withdrawn, but the paperwork remained. Claire, Lauren's current best friend and confidant, the woman who'd looked so nervous at the party, who'd been fidgeting with her pearls while Lauren humiliated me. I drove home with a new understanding of the playing field. This wasn't just about my marriage, it was about a complex web of relationships, grudges, and ambitions that stretched back years. Lauren was still at the office, so I had the house to myself. I spread the documents across my desk and began mapping connections, looking for patterns and vulnerabilities. By the time I finished, I had a clearer picture of my wife's enemies and allies. More importantly, I had a plan. My phone rang around 3. Claire Bennett. "Jack, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Lauren's phone." "Not at all, Claire. What can I do for you?" There was a long pause. "I was wondering if we could meet. There are some things about Lauren that I think you should know." "What kind of things?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a small park on the edge of town, the kind of place where dog walkers and joggers provided natural cover for sensitive conversations. I arrived first and found a bench with a clear view of the parking area. Claire showed up 20 minutes later, looking nervous and checking over her shoulder like she expected to be followed. She was a small woman in her early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. "Thank you for coming," she said, settling onto the bench beside me. "I wasn't sure you would." "Lauren's mentioned you're her closest friend." "I was. Once." Claire stared at the playground where a few children were climbing on the equipment while their mothers watched from nearby benches. "Did you know we used to work together? Before she got promoted and I didn't?" "I didn't know that." "She was my mentor when I first joined the company. Taught me everything about navigating corporate politics, about reading people and situations. I thought we were friends." Claire's voice was bitter. But when the promotion came up, the one that should have been mine, she threw me under the bus, made it look like I'd been taking credit for her work. The pieces were falling into place. "But you stayed friends with her." "I tried to move on, find another job. But Lauren has a long reach, and she made sure I couldn't get hired anywhere else in the industry. So I stayed, and I played the role of the grateful friend who understood that business was business." "That must have been difficult." Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea. Watching her get everything she wanted while I stayed stuck in the same position, listening to her complain about her life when she'd destroyed mine. But I learned patience, Jack. I learned to wait for the right opportunity." "And you think that opportunity is now?" "I think Lauren is finally vulnerable. The affair with Cross, the way she's been flaunting it, the risks she's taking, she's getting sloppy, overconfident." Claire turned to look at me directly. "And I think you're planning to do something about it." I studied her face, looking for deception or hidden agendas. What I saw was years of suppressed anger and a hunger for justice that matched my own. "What makes you think that?" "Because you're not the man she thinks you are. I've been watching you at company events, seeing how you observe and listen. You're gathering intelligence, aren't you?" "Let's say I am. What would you want in return for helping me?" "I want to watch her world burn," Claire said simply. "I want her to lose everything she took from me, and I want her to know that I helped make it happen." We talked for another hour, sharing information and building trust. Claire had access to Lauren's calendar, her emails, her personal conversations. She knew about the affair, about the financial manipulations, about the web of lies Lauren had constructed to protect herself. More importantly, she was willing to be my inside source. By the time we parted ways, I had 2 allies in my war against Lauren. Victoria would provide corporate intelligence and boardroom support, while Claire would give me access to Lauren's personal life and private communications. I drove home feeling better than I had in months. The old Jack had been fighting alone, reacting to Lauren's moves without understanding the larger game. But the new Jack was building a team, gathering resources, preparing for a campaign that would leave my wife with nothing but regrets and consequences. Lauren was home when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen counter with her laptop open and her phone beside her. She looked up when I entered, her expression neutral but watchful. "Where were you?" she asked. "Running errands. How was your day?" "Busy. The Cross situation has everyone on edge." She closed her laptop and gave me her full attention. "Jack, I've been thinking about us, about our marriage. Here it comes," I thought. The setup for the divorce conversation. "What about it? We've been growing apart. You must feel it too." Her voice was carefully modulated, like she'd practiced this speech. "Maybe we should consider counseling. or a trial separation? A trial separation. I kept my tone neutral, interested but not alarmed. That's a big step. It might be what we both need, some space to figure out what we want. She reached across the counter and touched my hand. I still care about you, Jack. I want us both to be happy. The performance was flawless. The concerned wife, reluctantly acknowledging that their marriage was in trouble, suggesting a mature solution that would benefit them both. If I hadn't read her messages, if I didn't know about her systematic betrayal, I might have actually believed her. Let me think about it, I said. It's not a decision to make lightly. Relief flashed across her features. Of course. Take all the time you need. After dinner, I retreated to my study while Lauren went upstairs to make phone calls. I could hear her voice through the ceiling, animated and excited, probably sharing the good news with Ethan that her husband was considering a separation. I opened my laptop and began drafting emails, one to Victoria, accepting her offer of alliance, one to Claire, confirming our partnership and requesting specific intelligence, and one to a private investigator I'd researched, asking for a consultation about documenting adultery and financial fraud. The war was escalating, and it was time to bring in professional help. My phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. "How are you holding up, Dad?" I texted back. "Better than expected. Trust me, okay?" "Always." I smiled and returned to my planning. Lauren thought she was maneuvering me into a corner, setting me up for a controlled demolition of our marriage that would leave her with everything, and me with nothing. She had no idea that I was already 3 moves ahead. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I woke up early before Lauren's alarm and went for a run through our neighborhood. The exercise helped clear my head and prepare me for what promised to be an eventful day. Lauren was in the shower when I returned, so I had a few minutes to check her phone. She'd changed her passcode, but I'd anticipated that. The night before, I'd installed a small piece of software that would mirror her messages to a secure server I'd set up. Not exactly legal, but not exactly criminal either. More of a gray area that I was comfortable navigating. The messages from overnight were illuminating. Ethan was pressuring her to move faster on the separation, worried that I might become suspicious and hire a lawyer. Lauren was reassuring him that everything was under control, that I was too trusting and too stupid to see what was happening. Stupid seemed to be their favorite word for me. I was looking forward to expanding their vocabulary. I made coffee and toast, playing the role of the considerate husband. Lauren came downstairs dressed for battle in a black power suit and red lipstick that made her look like she was ready to devour someone. "Big day today?" I asked, handing her a cup of coffee. "Board meeting this afternoon. We're discussing the Morrison succession plan." She checked her reflection in the toaster, adjusting her hair. "It could be a game changer for my career." "I'm sure you'll do great." She looked at me sharply, as if surprised by my supportive tone. "Thank you. That means a lot." After she left, I drove downtown to meet with the private investigator I'd contacted. Marcus Webb operated out of a small office above a pawn shop, the kind of place that looked like it had been decorated by someone who'd learned about detective work from old movies. Webb himself was nothing like the stereotypical PI. He was a former FBI agent in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of quiet intensity that suggested he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. "Mr. Mercer," he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. "You mentioned adultery and financial fraud in your email. Tell me what you know." I laid out everything: the affair, the property transfers, the systematic asset manipulation. Webb listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "How much evidence do you have?" he asked when I finished. I showed him printouts of the text messages, copies of the financial documents Victoria had provided, and photographs I'd taken of Lauren and Ethan together. Webb examined everything with professional detachment. "This is good work," he said. "You've got the foundation of a solid case, but if you want to destroy them completely, we need more." "What kind of more?" "Financial records showing the full extent of the asset manipulation. Evidence of corporate misconduct. If Cross is using his relationship with your wife to gain business advantages, that's a violation of his company's ethics policies. Documentation of the affair that would hold up in court." "How long would that take?" "A few weeks, maybe a month, if we're thorough." Webb leaned back in his chair. "But I have to ask, what's your endgame here? Are you looking for a favorable divorce settlement, or do you want to burn their lives to the ground?" I thought about Lauren's laughter at the party, about years of subtle humiliation and condescension, about the systematic way she'd been planning to destroy me. "Burn it down," I said. "All of it." Webb smiled for the first time since I'd entered his office. "Now we're talking. This kind of operation isn't cheap, but if you're serious about total war, I can make their lives very uncomfortable. We discussed fees and timelines, and I wrote him a check that would have made the old Jack wince, but the old Jack had been fighting with one hand tied behind his back. The new Jack was willing to invest in victory. From Webb's office, I drove to the corporate headquarters where Lauren worked. I had a lunch appointment with Victoria, ostensibly to discuss a construction project for the company, but really to coordinate our next moves. The Hartwell Industries building was a monument to corporate ambition, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a middle finger extended at the heavens. I'd actually worked on the construction 15 years ago, back when Lauren and I were still a team instead of enemies. Victoria met me in the lobby, and we walked to a restaurant across the street. She waited until we were seated and had ordered before getting down to business. "The board meeting is this afternoon," she said. "Lauren's going to make her pitch for the CEO track. She's got support from 3 of the 7 board members." "What about the other 4? 2 are undecided, 1 is definitely opposed, and 1 is me." Victoria cut her salad with surgical precision. "If I can sway one of the undecided votes, we can block her advancement." "What would it take to sway them?" "Evidence that she's a liability, something that shows poor judgment or ethical lapses." Victoria looked at me meaningfully, something like using her position to benefit a lover who works for a competing company. I understood. "How long do you need?" "The vote is scheduled for next Monday. If you can provide me with documentation of the affair and any evidence of corporate misconduct by Friday, I can present it to the board as a confidential ethics concern." "Consider it done." We finished lunch discussing construction details for the benefit of anyone who might be listening, but the real business was already concluded. Victoria would prepare the political battlefield while I gathered the ammunition. That afternoon, I drove to Claire's office building and waited in the parking garage until she emerged for her coffee break. We'd arranged a signal. If she needed to meet, she'd text me a coffee cup emoji. "Lauren's in full campaign mode," Claire said as we walked to a nearby Starbucks. "She's been making calls all morning, lining up support for the board vote." "What's her strategy?" "She's positioning herself as the innovative choice, the one who can modernize the company and increase profitability. She's also been subtly undermining the other candidates, spreading doubts about their capabilities." "Classic Lauren." "There's something else," Claire said, lowering her voice. "She's planning something for this weekend, a corporate retreat at Cross's Lake House. Supposedly it's a team-building exercise, but really it's a chance for her to schmooze the undecided board members in a relaxed setting." This was perfect. A weekend retreat would give Webb's surveillance team plenty of opportunities to document the affair, and the corporate setting would provide evidence of the ethical violations Victoria needed. "Who's invited?" "The full board, plus senior management and their spouses. Lauren specifically asked me to help coordinate it." Claire smiled grimly. "She has no idea that I'll be reporting everything back to you." We spent another 20 minutes discussing logistics and coordination. Claire would provide me with guest lists, schedules, and layout information for Cross's property. Webb's team would handle surveillance and documentation. Victoria would use the evidence to destroy Lauren's CEO ambitions. It was a 3-pronged attack that would leave my wife with nowhere to hide. That evening, I was in my study when Lauren came home, practically glowing with excitement. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. "Good day?" I asked. "Excellent day. The board meeting went better than I expected." She took a sip of wine and smiled. "I think I'm finally going to get the recognition I deserve." "That's great, honey. You've worked hard for it." "I have, haven't I?" She looked at me with something that might have been affection if I hadn't known better. "Jack, I've been thinking more about what we discussed, the trial separation." "Oh?" "I think it would be good for both of us. Give us some space to figure out what we really want." She set down her wine glass and leaned forward. "I've been looking at apartments downtown. Nothing fancy, just a place where I can stay during the week. Cut down on the commute?" Of course she had. Probably something close to Ethan's place, somewhere they could play house without worrying about nosy neighbors or inconvenient husbands. "That sounds reasonable," I said. "When were you thinking of making the move?" "Soon, maybe after this weekend. I'm organizing a corporate retreat, and I want to focus on that first." "The retreat sounds interesting. Where are you holding it?" "A colleague has a place on Lake-Morrison. Very secluded, perfect for team building and strategic planning." Lauren's eyes were bright with anticipation. "It could be the event that really establishes my leadership credentials." "I'm sure it will be memorable," I said, and I meant every word. After Lauren went to bed, I called Webb and filled him in on the weekend plans. He was enthusiastic about the surveillance opportunities and promised to have his best team in position. Then I called Victoria and Claire, coordinating our final preparations. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, but I felt more energized than I had in years. Lauren thought she was planning her coronation weekend, the event that would cement her rise to power and give her the perfect opportunity to publicly humiliate me one last time. Instead, she was planning her own execution. The irony was so perfect, it almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. Friday afternoon found me parked on a hill overlooking Lake Morrison, watching through binoculars as catering trucks and service vehicles prepared Ethan Cross's lake house for what Lauren believed would be her triumph. The property was impressive, a sprawling modern structure built into the hillside with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the water. Webb's surveillance team had been in position since dawn, hidden cameras placed strategically around the property with the help of a contact in the catering company. Everything Lauren and Ethan did this weekend would be documented in high definition. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Guest list confirmed, all 7 board members attending, plus spouses. Elle is sharing the master suite with her colleague. Schedule attached. The schedule was a masterpiece of corporate theater, team-building exercises, strategic planning sessions, and social events designed to showcase Lauren's leadership abilities. What she didn't know was that every moment would be recorded, every interaction documented, every ethical violation preserved for posterity. I drove back to town and spent the evening in my study, monitoring the live feeds Webb had set up. Lauren arrived at 6, looking radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Ethan greeted her at the door with a kiss that lasted just a moment too long for professional colleagues. The other guests began arriving shortly after, Victoria Lane looking sharp and predatory, the other board members with their spouses, senior managers eager to impress their potential future CEO. Claire arrived last, carrying a tablet and looking every inch the efficient assistant. I watched Lauren work the room, charming and manipulating with the skill of a master politician. She had a gift for making each person feel like they were the most important one there, like their opinion mattered more than anyone else's. It was the same skill she'd used on me 22 years ago, back when I was young and stupid enough to believe that someone like Lauren Whitmore could actually love someone like me. The evening progressed predictably. Cocktails on the deck, dinner in the main dining room, after-dinner drinks by the fireplace. Lauren gave a brief speech about vision and leadership that had everyone nodding appreciatively. Ethan played the gracious host, never quite crossing the line into obvious intimacy, but making it clear that he and Lauren were more than just colleagues. Around 11, the older board members began retiring to their rooms. Victoria caught my eye through the camera and mouthed something that looked like tomorrow. The real show would begin in the morning, when the team-building exercises started, and Lauren felt comfortable enough to let her guard down completely. I closed the laptop and went to bed, setting my alarm for dawn. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end for my wife's ambitions. Saturday morning was crisp and clear, perfect weather for outdoor activities. I resumed my position on the hillside, watching through binoculars while Webb's team monitored the electronic surveillance. Lauren had planned a series of trust exercises and problem-solving challenges designed to demonstrate her leadership philosophy. What she'd actually created was a series of opportunities for her and Ethan to display their inappropriate relationship in front of witnesses. The first exercise involved pairs of participants navigating an obstacle course while blindfolded, with one partner giving directions to the other. Lauren naturally paired herself with Ethan, and their performance was a masterclass in intimate communication disguised as teamwork. "A little to the left, darling," Lauren said, her hand lingering on Ethan's shoulder as she guided him around a hay bale. "I trust you completely," Ethan replied, his voice carrying undertones that had nothing to do with obstacle navigation. The other participants seemed oblivious to the subtext, but the cameras caught every gesture, every lingering touch, every meaningful glance. Webb's team was getting exactly the kind of evidence we needed. The morning exercises were followed by a strategic planning session in the main conference room. Lauren had prepared an elaborate presentation about the company's future, complete with charts and graphs that painted her as the visionary leader Hartwell Industries needed. But I noticed Victoria taking careful notes, asking pointed questions about implementation timelines and resource allocation. She was setting traps, creating opportunities for Lauren to make statements that could later be used against her. "This kind of aggressive expansion would require significant capital investment," Victoria said during one exchange. "Have you considered the risk factors?" "Risk is just opportunity in disguise," Lauren replied confidently. "Sometimes you have to be willing to bet everything to win everything." Victoria nodded thoughtfully, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Lauren had just articulated a philosophy that could be used to justify almost any accusation of reckless leadership. Lunch was served on the deck, with spectacular views of the lake providing a backdrop for more networking and relationship building. I watched Lauren work her magic on the undecided board members, using charm and flattery to build support for her CEO ambitions. But I also noticed Claire moving through the group like a ghost, refilling drinks and clearing plates while listening to every conversation. She had a small recording device disguised as a fitness tracker, capturing audio that would complement the video surveillance. The afternoon brought more team-building exercises, including a particularly revealing trust fall activity. When it was Lauren's turn to fall backward and trust Ethan to catch her, the moment stretched far longer than necessary. Their eyes locked in obvious intimacy. "I'll always catch you," Ethan murmured, his arms wrapped around her waist. "I know," Lauren whispered back, her hand caressing his cheek. The other participants politely looked away, but the cameras captured everything. Webb would have hours of footage showing clear evidence of an intimate relationship between Lauren and a competitor's executive. As evening approached, I drove back to town to prepare for the final phase of our operation. Tomorrow's board meeting would determine Lauren's fate, and Victoria needed the ammunition to destroy her rival's ambitions. I met Webb at his office, where his team had been editing the day's footage into a devastating highlight reel. The evidence was overwhelming: intimate conversations, inappropriate touching, clear violations of corporate ethics policies. "This is better than I hoped," Webb said, burning the footage onto several DVDs. "Even if she tries to claim it's all innocent, the optics are terrible. No board of directors wants their CEO involved in this kind of scandal." "What about the financial evidence?" "That's the real prize." Webb handed me a thick folder. "Cross has been using information from your wife to make strategic decisions for his company. We can trace at least 3 major deals where Hartwell Industries lost contracts to Cross's company immediately after Lauren had access to the bidding information." I flipped through the documents, seeing the pattern of betrayal laid out in spreadsheets and financial reports. Lauren hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been committing corporate espionage, selling out her own company for personal gain. "This is enough to destroy both of them," I said. "It's enough to destroy their careers, their reputations, and possibly send them to prison if the company decides to press charges." Webb leaned back in his chair. "Are you sure you want to go nuclear? Once this comes out, there's no going back." I thought about Lauren's laughter at the corporate party, about her systematic plan to leave me with nothing, about 22 years of marriage that had apparently meant nothing to her. "I'm sure," I said. Sunday morning, I delivered copies of the evidence to Victoria at her home, a modernist masterpiece in the hills overlooking the city. She reviewed everything with the thoroughness of a prosecutor preparing for trial. "This is comprehensive," she said finally. "The board will have no choice but to remove her from consideration for the CEO position. They might even vote to terminate her employment entirely." "What about Cross?" "I'll be making some calls to contacts at his company. This kind of ethical violation will end his career." Victoria smiled coldly. "By the time I'm finished, neither of them will be employable in this industry." "When will you present it to the board?" "Tomorrow morning, before the scheduled vote. I'll frame it as a last-minute ethics concern that requires immediate attention." Victoria gathered the documents into a secure briefcase. "By noon tomorrow, your wife's ambitions will be nothing but ashes." I drove home feeling a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The trap was set, the evidence was overwhelming, and Lauren had no idea what was coming. She'd spent the weekend believing she was consolidating her victory, when in reality she'd been documenting her own destruction. Lauren returned home Sunday evening, glowing with confidence and excitement. She practically floated through the front door, her smile bright enough to power the house. "How was the retreat?" I asked, playing the interested husband. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." She kicked off her shoes and spun around in the foyer like a teenager. "I think I really connected with the board members. The vote tomorrow is going to be a formality." "That's wonderful, honey. You deserve this." She looked at me with something that might have been genuine affection. "You know what? You're right. I do deserve this. I've worked harder than anyone else, sacrificed more, taken bigger risks. It's time for me to get what I've earned." "I couldn't agree more," I said, and meant every word. After she went upstairs to pack for her early morning meeting, I sat in my study and opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tomorrow would see the end of Lauren's corporate ambitions, the destruction of her relationship with Ethan, and the beginning of her understanding that actions have consequences. I raised my glass to the ceiling, toasting the wife who thought she'd outmaneuvered me. "To getting what you deserve," I said quietly. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made the city look like it was crying. I woke up early and made coffee, sitting at the kitchen counter while Lauren rushed around upstairs, preparing for what she believed would be her coronation. She came downstairs dressed in her most powerful suit. navy blue with sharp lines that made her look like a corporate warrior. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled to perfection, her confidence radiating like heat from a furnace. "This is it," she said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "By lunch, I'll be the CEO-elect of Hartwell Industries." "I'm proud of you," I said, and there was no deception in my voice. I was proud of how thoroughly she'd destroyed herself, proud of how perfectly my plan was about to unfold. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that felt like a goodbye even though she didn't know it yet. "I'll call you after the meeting. We should celebrate tonight." "I'll be waiting," I promised. After she left, I drove downtown and parked across the street from the Hartwell Industries building. I wanted to be close when Lauren's world collapsed, to see the aftermath of her destruction firsthand. At exactly 9 a.m., Victoria Lane entered the building carrying a briefcase that contained the evidence of Lauren's betrayal. The board meeting was scheduled for 10, but Victoria had arranged a preliminary session with the other members to review what she called urgent ethical concerns. My phone buzzed with updates from Claire, who was inside the building. V arrived, board members gathering in conference room. L still in her office, reviewing presentation. I imagined Lauren in her corner office, making final adjustments to the PowerPoint presentation that would never be given, rehearsing the speech that would never be heard. She had no idea that 3 floors above her, 7 board members were reviewing evidence of her systematic betrayal. At 9:47, Claire texted again. Board meeting moved up. L summoned immediately. She looks confused. I could picture Lauren's face as she received the unexpected summons, the first crack in her confidence as she realized something had changed. She'd probably assume it was a formality, a chance for the board to congratulate her before the official vote. At 10:15, L entered boardroom. V presenting evidence, can hear shouting through closed doors. The shouting would be Lauren, of course. Faced with undeniable proof of her affair and corporate espionage, she'd resort to anger and denial, trying to bluster her way through the crisis. But Victoria Lane was not someone who could be intimidated or manipulated. At 10:43, L stormed out of boardroom, looked like she was crying, heading for elevator. I started my truck and positioned myself to follow Lauren when she emerged from the building. She'd be in shock, desperate, looking for someone to blame or somewhere to run. I wanted to see where she went, what she did when her carefully constructed world finally collapsed. Lauren burst through the building's main entrance like she was fleeing a fire, her perfect composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, her powerful suit wrinkled from whatever confrontation had just taken place upstairs. She fumbled with her car keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock her BMW. Even from across the street, I could see her hands shaking as she started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage with the reckless urgency of someone who had nowhere to go but couldn't stand to stay still. I followed at a distance as she drove through downtown traffic, running red lights and making illegal turns like the rules no longer applied to her. She was heading toward the hotel district, probably looking for Ethan, seeking comfort from the man who'd helped destroy her career. But Ethan Cross was having problems of his own. Victoria had made good on her promise to contact his company, and by now he'd probably been summoned to his own emergency meeting with HR and senior management. The evidence of his relationship with Lauren, combined with proof that he'd used inside information to benefit his company, would be more than enough to end his career. Lauren's BMW screeched into the Marriott parking garage, and she ran toward the elevators like she was being chased. I parked nearby and followed, curious to witness the reunion between 2 people who just discovered that their betrayal had consequences. The elevator doors closed before I could catch up, but the hotel's directory showed that Cross Industries maintained a corporate suite on the 15th floor. I took the next elevator up and positioned myself in the hallway where I could observe without being seen. The shouting started before I even reached Ethan's door. Lauren's voice, shrill with panic and accusation, mixed with Ethan's deeper tones of anger and denial. I couldn't make out specific words, but the emotional content was clear. 2 people who'd thought they were clever, discovering that they'd been outmaneuvered by someone they'd underestimated. The door burst open, and Lauren stumbled into the hallway, followed by Ethan. Both of them looked like they'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "This is your fault," Lauren was saying, her voice breaking. "You said no one would find out. You said we were being careful." "My fault?" Ethan's face was flushed with rage. "You're the one who insisted on flaunting our relationship at that retreat. You're the one who couldn't resist showing off." "I was building support for my promotion. I was securing our future." "What future? I just got fired, Lauren. Escorted out of the building like a criminal. 20 years of career advancement gone because I was stupid enough to trust you." They stood in the hallway screaming at each other like children, all pretense of sophistication and corporate polish stripped away. These were the people who'd thought they were smart enough to destroy me. reduce me to nothing while they built their empire on the ruins of my marriage. "We can fix this," Lauren said, grabbing Ethan's arm. "We can hire lawyers, fight back, prove that it was all taken out of context." Ethan shook her off violently. "There's no we anymore, Lauren. I'm done. I'm finished with you. Finished with this whole mess." He turned to go back into his suite, then paused. "You know what the really pathetic part is? Your husband probably planned this whole thing. The man you called stupid just outsmarted both of us." The door slammed shut, leaving Lauren alone in the hallway. She stood there for a long moment, her shoulders shaking with sobs, before finally noticing me watching from the alcove near the elevators. "Jack?" Her voice was small, broken. "What are you doing here?" I stepped out of the shadows, no longer bothering to hide my presence. "Watching you get what you deserve." Her face cycled through a dozen emotions: surprise, fear, anger, desperation. "You did this. You orchestrated all of this." "I didn't orchestrate anything, Lauren. I just documented what you were already doing and made sure the right people saw the evidence. You spied on me. You violated my privacy. I protected myself from a wife who was planning to destroy me." I walked closer, enjoying the way she backed against the wall. "Did you really think I was too stupid to figure out what you were doing? The property transfers, the asset manipulation, the systematic plan to leave me with nothing? I never meant for it to go this far. The affair, the business dealings, it all just got out of hand. No, Lauren, it was deliberate and calculated, just like everything else you do. You saw an opportunity to upgrade your life and you took it, regardless of who got hurt in the process." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "What do you want from me? An apology? I'm sorry, Jack. I'm truly sorry for everything. I don't want your apology. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't manipulate and betray people without eventually paying a price." "Please," she whispered. "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my future. Isn't that enough?" I thought about the corporate party where she'd humiliated me in front of colleagues and strangers. I thought about the years of condescension and contempt, the systematic way she'd been planning to destroy my life while pretending to be a loving wife. "No," I said, "it's not nearly enough." I turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving her sobbing in the hallway. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name, pleading for mercy or understanding or forgiveness, but those were commodities she'd forfeited long ago. The elevator doors closed on the sound of her desperation, and I descended toward the lobby feeling lighter than I had in years. The old Jack would have felt guilty about her pain, would have been tempted to offer comfort or support, but the old Jack was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the only way to win is to ensure your enemies lose everything. Outside, the rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds. I drove home slowly, savoring the moment, thinking about the future that was now possible. Lauren would probably try to salvage something from the wreckage of her career, but her reputation in the industry was finished. Ethan would disappear into whatever hole disgraced executives crawled into when their schemes collapsed, and I would rebuild, stronger and wiser than before, with allies like Victoria and Claire who understood the value of loyalty and the price of betrayal. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Samantha. "Dad, I just heard something crazy from one of my friends whose mom works at Hartwell Industries. Is it true that Mom got fired?" "It's true," I said. "She made some poor choices, and now she's dealing with the consequences. Are you okay?" I looked at my house, my sanctuary, the place Lauren had tried to steal from me through legal manipulation and corporate scheming. It was still mine, would always be mine, because I'd been smart enough to see her game and skilled enough to beat her at it. "I'm better than okay," I told my daughter. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The war was over, and I had won. But as I sat in my truck, watching the house that represented everything I'd fought to protect, I realized that victory was just the beginning. Lauren would try to rebuild, would probably attempt some kind of revenge or retaliation. Ethan might resurface with new schemes or legal challenges. The game was far from over. It was just entering a new phase, one where I held all the advantages and my enemies had nothing left to lose. I smiled and got out of the truck, ready for whatever came next. After all, I'd learned something important about myself over the past few weeks. I was very good at being the villain, and I was just getting started. The old Jack had been content to build things, to create and nurture and trust. The new Jack understood that sometimes you had to tear down the old structures before you could build something better, and I was very good at tearing things down.